Well, hello there. Thank you for the introduction. You should see my screen now. And let's start talking about something very important and very essential to CakePHP. It's about namespaces and how to use them and how they are set up in CakePHP. But first of all, something about me. My name is Pfeifer. I'm a web developer at Sunlime in Austria. If you want to go to the webpage, it's sunlime.at. But as far as I know, currently we only have a German website, so you will have to translate with Google as far as I know, if you can't read German. Mainly I'm working with WordPress and Drupal, but I've fallen in love with CakePHP ever since I started working with it in 2017. And yeah, as Amanda already talked about, I'm pretty active in the support channel trying to help everyone who's having any issue whatsoever where I can help with anything. And so let's dive into what I want to talk about today. So first of all, why we need PHP namespaces in the grand scheme of all things, how these namespaces are set up in CakePHP, then how you can use these namespaces yourself in the CakePHP framework. But basically, it's not really CakePHP specific. The whole namespace topic is very generic and used in many other PHP frameworks like Laravel or Symfony or any other larger PHP framework nowadays. And in the end, you will probably notice some common issues when you're working with namespaces that you will regularly run into if you mess up something or just forget something to add. So first of all, why do we need PHP namespaces? Let's take these two classes. These are living in two separate folders. So one is books/myutility and one is authors/myutility. Both are named the same, but they have a different function to be called. So usually as a PHP beginner, one could argue that it would work that you just require these both files in the native PHP file and call them with the class name, and you think, okay, but the function name is unique, so this should work. But no, this won't work because PHP says fatal error, cannot declare class myutility because the name is already in use. So, okay, some would argue that, okay, all PHP classes need to be unique from the name, but no. This would be catastrophic if every PHP framework needs to have their own unique class names in every subfolder and everywhere. It's would immensely large class names would be generated via that logic. So what do we have to do? We need to add namespaces to our classes. But what are these? So as shown previously, this is one example of this class. But now we need just to add one line at the top, as you see, just the namespace. And the same, of course, for the other class. So one is authors/myutility from a file location perspective. So it has the authors namespace, and the other is books and has the namespace books. So then again, let's start trying that. But again, with the same code as before, this doesn't work. So why? Well, there is one more problem. We have to tell PHP which class to use. Before, we just had myutility :export and export all. But since we now have added namespaces, we have to tell PHP that these namespaces should be used for their for these specific classes. And now we have success. So now these work just in a plain, simple PHP file, nothing really related to CakePHP or nothing really specific, just the plain old namespacing, how it is set up and how it works without Composer. This is native to PHP. So to sum up, PHP classes need to be unique in their namespace. We have to still keep the classes unique in their own namespaces, but you can have the same class name in different namespaces, as we have seen before. So we use namespaces to group classes together in their own context. However, you may desire to group them together. And if we want to use a class, we need to specify in which namespace it is living in. So as seen before. So the namespaces in CakePHP can be seen in pretty much any controller, any model. And so just look at the plain old automatically generated or checked out source controller, app controller, what we can see in here. So we see the file has the controller has a namespace of app controller, and it extends controller. This controller is related to this base CakePHP controller. So first of all, this class lives in the namespace app controller, and it uses the controller of the Cake controller namespace, which is the CakePHP course namespace, because we use the generated and the provided functionality of CakePHP. But why does it have to be app controller for our own app controller file? Why doesn't it have to be source controller? Because some may argue that it lives in the folder source and controller and app controller. Well, for that, we have to look into the Composer JSON. And in the Composer JSON, there is the auto-loading section, which defines which namespace, which is on the left side, will be mapped to which folder in the currently relative path of the Composer JSON. So with this Composer automatically, the Composer automatically loads all classes in the folder source into the namespace app. If we look into example given the CakePHP core, there we have the same, just with the Cake namespace. Or if we look into a plugin, let's say the debug kit plugin, we can see the same, that it has its own namespace. So this is very important to know that if you're looking at any namespaces or something in particular in your code or an example where you want to install a plugin, to just first look at the namespace where you have to install something, so you know where you have to look at when you're looking for the code. So how do I use that now? Well, let's go into an example. I've created here a base CakePHP app, which looks something like this. It just has a single table, which is coins, and has basically these columns in them. It's just some imported data from a cryptocurrency API, which I found which is easily usable. And so the only thing I've added is this sync button at the top, which says sync is done whenever I click it. So it updates the current state of the data which is currently in there. But the way I've implemented it is via the coins controller. So everything at the top here is just basic generated code, which you can get from CakeBake. But in the end, I've added the sync command. And so let's just quickly go through that. This is the API call, which I make to get the JSON file. I just check that I can get anything from the API at all, parse that JSON, build the data, which is then inserted into the database, check if we have this ID. So let's go back here. This entry, which we get from the JSON string, or let's just call it anyway, just so you can see every entry in the JSON has an ID. So we check if this ID is already present in our database. If it is already present, just use that entity. If it is not present, create a new one, because maybe a new cryptocurrency has risen from somewhere because someone decided to just create a new cryptocurrency because we have so little. Anyway, after we have that entity, just we finally add the patch entity. So we check if the data is valid at all and save that into the database. In the end, I will just create an array of all the IDs I've gotten and compare that to all the IDs I've already gotten in the database. So I've just read Steinkell's message in Slack. Anyway, so in the end, this code just deletes anything that is not present anymore via the API, and I just show a success message. So this is basically what this code is doing. But now one can argue, okay, this code can just be called via this button if we call that URL/coin/sync. But what if I want to automate that and create, let's example given a command, so I can use Chrome via the CLI to just automate that and get my updated cryptocurrency data every hour. Well, it would, of course, for a beginner be easy to just create a command and copy and paste that in there. But this isn't really good practice, and copying code is really never a good solution for anything. So I will show you now how you can refactor that into a utility class, as I would call it. But as we've heard yesterday and today as well, utility classes and service classes are, from the naming scheme here the same. So I call it utility classes, some may call it service classes. Basically, it's a generic PHP class where you can put logic in there so you can do stuff with it. So first of all, let's create a new folder in our source directory, which I will call utility, but you can call it service if you would like. And in there, I will create a coin sync PHP. Then do the basic stuff. So as we've seen before, copy the declare statement. So we have strict typings and create the coin sync class just with nothing else special to it. But as we've seen before, I will now add the namespace. And if we look into the composer.json again, we have an autoloader, PSR4, app namespace mapped to our source. So since, again, we are in the source folder utility, we have to declare app/utility for this class. Then we'll just create a generic public function sync, or let's call it toSync, and just copy, or not really copy, but cut out the already present working logic from the coins controller and insert it in there. Well, now we have some problems because with PHP Storm, at least, the scope for the coins model is not present anymore because we are not in the CakePHP context, or specifically in the coins context anymore. And so it doesn't know where the coins table is in that regard. So we have to tell the class that we want to have the coins table in our utility class. And for that, we have to use the table, the locator aware trait. And let's just, yeah, okay. The locator aware trait basically gives you the option to call get table locator. And with the table locator, you have more possibilities to import models and tables. But in the end, one additional function this table locator trait will give you is, no, sorry, I've imported the wrong trait. Sorry, it's not the locator aware trait; it's the model aware trait. It's the more current version of how I would like to do it. So back again, the model aware trait. If we look into that, we have a load model function, and with the load model function, you can get the table class. As you've seen in the example here, if I just type in use model aware trait, it automatically adds the namespace at the top for me because PHP Storm just does it automatically. I will talk about that later, how you can do that with VS Code, because there is an extension for that, but we'll get to that later. Anyway, to initialize our table object in this scope, we need to tell the function, the load model function, that we want to load the coins model class. And I just personally like to have that coins table object actually, not object, the coins table property in the class, so the autocomplete and the reference to all the functions and to all the available logic which is in the coins table can be seen here. So if we, sorry, it needs to be coins, not coins table. And now, as you can see, this error coins doesn't throw any errors, and we now basically have a working utility class, but we have some problems here. In the controller, we just use the flash component to show a success message and redirect it to the index function again, so that we just show the flash message that something has happened. This doesn't work here anymore because, again, we are not in the controller context. So the easiest solution would be just, since this is the path of success, we just return true. And if something goes wrong, so coins API seems to be done, or let's just, sorry, I have to keep that in there just so it is easier to work with. Let's just return true here and return false on the path where probably the API is down or something has happened with the website. So, okay, we have a CoinSync class in the app utility namespace, which we now can use. But how do we do that in our controller? Well, here again, PHP Storm does a little bit more, which newer PHP developers wouldn't see automatically. So if I just type CoinSync, it just automatically detects the app utility class, and it injected the use statement at the top, so I don't have to type in manually the whole namespace of this class. At the end, CoinSync do sync. So if this will work, just redirect back to the index page, and if something goes wrong, we show that something has gone wrong. Now let's check again that everything is working. Okay, I don't get any error. Let's just delete one and sync it back in. Okay, this seems to have worked. So, okay, we haven't broken anything. We just moved the logic from the sync method into a separate coins sync class, which we now are able to use in other places where it is easier to call that functionality. So, as said before, we can now bake commands which we used to call that functionality via the CLI. So just CakeBake command sync, coin sync. And in here, let's just remove the options parser because we don't need it. And the execute sync basically has the same code as we have in the sync controller, in the coins controller sync function. So if we copy paste that in there, again, PHP Storm recognizes that I want to use some code here which hasn't imported any namespaces. So it automatically, yeah, we don't need that use namespace. It automatically added that CoinSync app utility namespace at the top again. We just don't use flash messages in the commands. We just use IO success and IO error if something goes wrong. And so we have a cake coinsync command, and with that we get a success. And again, if I just show you, I just add some oh okay, no, it was just that, I think. No, actually, okay, yeah, but anyway, that's more how you would catch that and how you would handle that error. There are ways and possibilities how you can do that, but in the end, that is the most straightforward way I would do that, to introduce utility classes for me, or service classes, as some would say, into the CakePHP framework, because I too myself fell into the trap to just create controller component after controller component and try to reuse them in any way possible in places where they shouldn't have belonged in the first place. So it's just one easy, quick way how you can clean up your code and reuse code so you don't have to copy it and do that. So then let's go back to the slides. About the IDE support, as you've seen, PHP Storm has built-in support for namespaces and will handle most of the common issues for you. That as in the add the use statements or show you if use statements aren't used anymore in the classes, that they are grayed out. For VS Code, I have found two extensions which worked pretty well for me. The one is PHP IntelliFence. Be aware, not IntelliSense, it's IntelliFence, because the PHP IntelliSense VS Code extension doesn't seem to be up to date anymore and has some more issues where people aren't getting the expected results. So this is one alternative if you don't have PHP Storm and you prefer VS Code, to basically mainly use this extension. There's also the PHP Namespace Resolver, which also helps you find classes and which are called the same, but live in a different namespace. So these are two that I would recommend. But let's talk about the errors, which, as said, you will probably run into if you work with namespaces regularly. So in this case, in our example, class app controller CoinSync was not found. And the problem here is that the use statement is missing, or you can also, if you only use the class name once in the whole PHP class, you can also declare that whole path via a fully qualified class name. So just to show you what I mean, basically you can copy what has been in the use statement, insert it at the end, so it just doesn't say coinsync double. But every fully qualified class name needs to start with a backspace. So with that, the whole sync logic will work. I've forgotten that I tampered with the URL, and the sync logic now works again. Just not with a use statement, but with a fully qualified class name. That's that. But there are other problems as well. I have also seen errors where someone tried to insert a use statement inside a function, and this will not work. So just don't put use statements inside any functions, just put them outside of the sync function. Or if you are, where in CakePHP you are most likely always in some sort of class namespace or class context, that it has to be outside of the class definition. So the same, you can't put you can't put use statements here. It's just for traits. So these are the two main differences where you have to be aware that these are the namespace uses, and everything inside the class namespace is for traits where you extend the base application. But that's a whole codes design and software design topic, when to use traits. We've already Shoito already described when to use what, and you can go back, watch that if you're watching the VOD, and see what he has been talking about there. Also, if you're working with namespaces, you have to watch the folder structure. So again, here's the app utility coinsync, as we've seen before. The namespace in the coinsync is also the same. But here I tampered with the folder name, and this will not work as well. It will just show the same error as above, where it just can't find the namespace for that class. So or not the name, it will just can't find that class, and you will have to adjust the folder name so it also says utility and not other utility. And basically, that's all I have to say about how to prevent the common errors. But shortly, let's talk about when you should not use a utility class, at least in CakePHP. If you got any duplicate code used only inside controllers, put it in a component. If you have duplicate code inside models and only in models, use a behavior. If you got duplicate code for the view or for templates, view in this context is really just the output of the templates folder, not the view app class or something like that. Then use elements in the template and not any generic PHP class names. And with that, I will just say, when life is getting you down, you'll always have cake. And thank you for watching.